It was 11:42 on a Tuesday when I saw Ray Fallon, the man whose code runs through the veins of our entire platform like a heartbeat, quietly notarizing something during lunch in the break room. No one noticed but me. Everyone else was too busy crowding around Julian's desk while he demonstrated, badly, a prototype Ray had built in 2019. They laughed when Julian called it his visionary leap. Ray just sipped his black coffee, like he'd seen the future already and decided it wasn't worth stopping. That was Ray, always in the corner, always watching, always 5 steps ahead. I joined Archbite 7 years ago, back when we were still working above a Thai restaurant that smelled like peanut oil and startup desperation. Ray was already there. Back then, Wade called him our miracle builder, the one who got us to MVP in under 3 months, who knew every inch of the stack, who literally negotiated with AWS on our behalf because Wade didn't know what a VPC was. Ray didn't care about spotlights. He cared about clean code, stable infrastructure, and quiet results. But time passed. Flash got louder. Julian showed up 2 years ago, all swagger and TED Talk energy, and Wade, he fell in love fast. He's got vision, Wade kept saying, like Ray had been blindfolded this whole time. The more Julian pitched, the more Ray got benched. I watched the shift like slow erosion, little things like Ray being dropped from email chains, then bigger ones, like Wade rewriting our internal org chart without Ray's name on it. You don't erase a backbone without consequences. But that's the thing. Wade didn't know what bones look like. He only cared about muscles that flexed for show. And here's where I'll say it plainly. If you're listening to this and you're one of the 97% of people who never hit subscribe, please do. Like the video. It doesn't cost you anything, but it really helps our team keep bringing you stories like this, the kind where the quiet ones don't stay silent forever. Back to Ray. He never fought, never raised his voice, never even corrected Julian when he repackaged Ray's routing model and called it Julian's funnel. I once asked Ray why he didn't speak up. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't interrupt a magician while he's setting the table." I thought he was being poetic. I didn't realize he was planning something. There was one afternoon, just a couple months before the acquisition rumors started swirling, when I walked past the server room and saw Ray carrying a stack of printouts. Actual paper, a rarity in our world. He had this battered manila folder labeled Control Folder A in fine Sharpie lettering. I asked him if he needed help. He smiled, shook his head, and said, "Nope, just making sure the fire exits are still where I left them." I laughed. He didn't. Not a joke then. The odd thing is, no one ever really fired Ray. He just got quieter, less visible, like someone fading out of a photograph. His keycard still worked. His credentials never got revoked. But the boardroom forgot he existed. Wade forgot. Julian never even knew. But not me. I saw him. I saw what he carried. And I remembered that lunch hour. The notary, the signature, the way he slipped the stamped document into his inner coat pocket without a word. You only notarize something when you want it to outlive you. And Ray was planning to outlive all of us. Julian strutted into Archbite like he already owned the damn building. Hair perfect, sneakers too clean, that permanent smirk of a man who's never failed because someone else always picked up the slack before things got real. I remember his first all hands. He didn't even bother introducing himself properly. Just stood up, clicked open a Prezi deck and said, "What we need is disruption. Root-level disruption." I caught Ray's eye across the room. He was staring at the screen with a look I couldn't read then. Now I know it was disbelief dressed in silence. By the end of that week, Wade had taken to calling Julian our Elon. He said it without irony. "He just gets it," he told me once in the elevator. "He's raw potential." I wanted to scream. Raw potential? Julian couldn't even deploy a rollback without turning Slack into a war zone, but he talked fast, threw around words like asymmetrical scaling and cognitive throughput, and Wade lapped it up like it was gospel. No one bothered checking if the guy even knew where our core routing table lived. Spoiler, he didn't. Ray did. The erosion started subtle. Ray's name stopped showing up on calendar invites. At first, he'd get a looping you in afterthought email. Then, not even that. Julian began taking meetings Ray used to lead. Product review, back-end architecture, even investor calls. And here's the kicker. He wasn't even trying to hide it. During one tech webinar with a bunch of VC vultures, Julian presented this flowchart with a proud little designed by me flourish. I almost choked on my coffee, because I knew that chart. I'd seen Ray sketch it on a whiteboard in 2019 during an overnight migration crisis, right before AWS throttled our bandwidth. I knew it because I helped document the damn thing. Ray didn't say a word, just watched the screen, arms crossed, lips tight. Afterward, in the kitchen, I tried to get him to react. "He stole your diagram," I said, handing him a refill of that bitter black sludge he calls coffee. Ray took it, sipped, then shrugged. "You ever see a dog chasing its tail?" he asked. "Eventually it catches something. Doesn't mean it knows what to do with it." Then he walked out, no further comment. But I saw the crack in him. He wasn't untouched. He was absorbing every slight, every insult, every theft, like a battery charging. People think silence means submission. No. With Ray, silence meant precision. He was listening while everyone else performed. Wade, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. Pushing press briefings where Julian was now leading the technical evolution of Archbyte's infrastructure. In a Forbes interview, he said, "Julian brings fresh perspective to legacy design. He's architecting our next phase." Architecting? The man couldn't even spell container orchestration without autocorrect. The real sting came when our company deck was updated. New logo, new faces, new tagline, innovation led by visionaries. Julian's headshot was front and center. Ray's? Gone. Not even a courtesy mention in the timeline. I watched Ray scroll through the deck during a quiet moment in the break room. He didn't flinch. Just closed the file, then opened Terminal and typed something into his private repo I couldn't see. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. That was the week he started coming in an hour earlier than everyone else and leaving an hour later. Not out of desperation, out of purpose. The air around him changed. Denser, heavier. People kept overlooking him. But they didn't notice the way his posture shifted when Julian spoke, or how he'd stop typing and just listen. You could feel it building. Like the way the air thickens before a storm hits. You don't see the lightning yet, but you know it's coming. It started like everything else does in tech, quietly, like a whisper slipped through a Slack thread and landed in the wrong DM. "They're sniffing around again," someone typed. "Big Danish firm this time, old money, serious buyout potential." I didn't think much of it until Wade started dressing better and showing up to the office 3 days in a row. That's when you know something's brewing, when the CEO starts pretending he remembers how espresso works. By the end of the week, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was full-blown executive theater. NDAs were passed around like candy. Conference rooms were mysteriously booked for strategy sessions. Julian started rehearsing pitches in the lobby like a Broadway understudy. And Ray? Ray was invisible. He wasn't included in any of it, not the pitch deck updates, not the architecture deep dives, not even the off-the-record whiteboard chats where the real decisions got made. His security access began to quietly bleed permissions, bit by bit, folder by folder. One day, he tried to open a sandbox he'd built to run our diagnostic load tests. Locked. The next, his access to the legacy backup system was revoked. No explanation. Just radio silence. It was like watching someone slowly get ghosted by a machine they built. I found him one evening, long after everyone else had gone home, in the basement server closet. No lights, just the hum of machines and the glow of a screen. He was transferring files, not en masse, not panic-driven, deliberate, calm. He had a hard drive with a taped-on label, Control Folder A. I stood in the doorway and asked, "Is that what I think it is?" He didn't look up. "It's what they think they already have," he said. Then he clicked eject. What he didn't know, and I only found out because I was the one tasked with drafting the About Us section of the acquisition brief, is that Wade had completely erased him from the story. Ray Fallon wasn't just an afterthought. He was a liability. The board wanted a clean narrative. A young visionary team, tight leadership structure, no lingering equity clutter. They wanted Julian to look like the technical founder, a media-trained messiah, not the guy who once debugged a fatal race condition barefoot at 2 a.m. on a concrete floor. Wade's justification. Buyers want energy, movement, not legacy names. He said it over lunch like he was talking about a moth-eaten sweater. Ray's brilliant, sure, but he's not presentable. Henrik wants a brand, not a backroom wizard. Henrik, the buyer, a quiet exec from Denmark with a reputation for cleaning house and scaling fast. Wade wanted to impress him. Julian wanted to be him. And Ray? Ray was the sacrifice they were all too eager to make. The thing is, Ray didn't flinch. When I told him about the revised company history, about how they credited Julian with designing the routing system, he nodded like he expected it. When someone steals your house, he said, they forget who poured the foundation until it rains. Then he left, quiet as ever. That same week, he started working from a private terminal. No shared logins, no cloud traces, just a quiet machine in the back corner of the old staging lab, surrounded by boxes labeled with dates and two-letter codes I couldn't decipher. He brought his own thermos, started locking the door behind him. Julian, meanwhile, started practicing Danish on Duolingo. I overheard Wade on a call late one night, pacing the hallway outside his office. "We scrubbed the Ipe trail," he said. "There's nothing Henrik will see that links Ray to ownership. We're safe." They weren't. Because what they didn't know, and what Ray never said, was that Control Folder A wasn't just a backup. It wasn't even insurance, it was ownership. And he just moved it offline. The day Julian was officially named CTO, the office reeked of champagne and self-congratulation. They wheeled in a goddamn cake shaped like a motherboard. Wade gave a speech that started with, "The future is now," and ended with, "And it's got Julian's fingerprints all over it." I swear, somewhere in the corner, the building's foundation whimpered. Ray didn't show up. No one asked why. I knew where he was. He wasn't hiding. He was calculating. That morning, I saw him step into a rideshare outside the building with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. The destination? A nondescript office 2 blocks away from City Hall. Not a flashy law firm. Just a name on the door. Garrison and Teal, LLP. The kind of place that doesn't advertise but gets results you only hear about in stunned silence. Turns out, Ray hadn't just built the system. He'd built the paperwork around it too. Years ago, when Archbyte was just a lean team working off folding tables, Ray had negotiated an early agreement, one buried in the appendices of the company's incorporation docs, Clause 11.4c. In the absence of a formal revocation or exclusive assignment, all novel proprietary routing systems authored by Ray Fallon shall remain under the protective legal domain of the Fallon Infrastructure Holding Trust. No one had revoked it. No one had even remembered it existed, except Ray. And now, his attorney. The meeting was short, efficient, surgical. Within hours, a record was updated deep inside the U.S. Patent Licensing Archive. A tiny change, just a shift of the license holder field from Archbyte Inc. back to Fallon Infrastructure Holding Trust. Time-stamped. Public. But buried beneath layers of jargon and categories no tech bro would ever think to search. If you weren't looking for it, it looked like maintenance noise. If you were looking, it meant everything. Ray left the office without a word. Didn't call anyone, didn't ping a single Slack. Meanwhile, Wade was halfway through his Messiah tour. "We're scaling smart," he told TechCrunch. "Julian's leadership has redefined our stack and optimized our infrastructure for global reach." In the Forbes feature, he claimed, "We rebuilt everything from scratch, honestly. What Ray did was great, don't get me wrong, but this new system, all Julian." Ray printed out that article, not to frame it, to mark it. I saw the copy later in his desk drawer, with 2 lines underlined in red ink, and beneath them, a sticky note, false claim, public misrepresentation, intent to mislead buyer. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was logging. The most surreal part? Wade and Julian had no idea. They were too busy filming their startup documentary with rented lighting and fake coding montages. Julian walked around the office with a gimbal like he was Steve Jobs reborn. "We're disrupting back-end logic," he said into a camera once. Ray happened to be walking past at that moment. He didn't stop, didn't even glance toward them, just kept walking toward the lab. That same afternoon, I peeked into Ray's screen while he was out grabbing his lunch. A single tab was open, the licensing database. Refresh, screenshot. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't panicking, he was preparing. Because Ray understood something Wade never would. You don't need to be seen to be in control. You just need to hold the right signature, in the right place, at the right time. And now, he did. Henrik's accent was calm and clipped, like someone who didn't need to raise his voice because the numbers always listened. "Before we finalize, I'd like to review the routing architecture," he said during the 4th acquisition prep call. "Specifically, the Ipe ownership of the core stack." Simple sentence, clean delivery, but it landed like a depth charge. Julian blinked. "Of course. We have all that. Fully proprietary, developed in-house, owned by Archbyte." His voice had that forced, casual tone he used when he was pretending not to be nervous. He clicked to the next slide. A spaghetti mess of shapes and connectors, all labeled with sleek branding terms and none of the real logic beneath them. It was a mural of smoke and mirrors, and it looked nothing like the system I'd seen Ray handcraft over the years. Henrik didn't smile. He just scribbled something in a notepad and said, "Good. I'll have our technical due diligence team review the documentation later this week. Please include full author history and license trail." Julian nodded too fast. "Absolutely." Ray, who wasn't even supposed to be on the call, sat quietly in the back of the open plan floor, headphones in but audio leaking just enough for me to catch. He didn't look up, just continued writing something on a legal pad. No keyboard, no digital trace, just ink on paper. The next 2 days were chaos. Julian started dragging engineers into meeting rooms like cattle through turnstiles. He pushed them to reverse engineer a system they'd only ever interacted with on the surface. There were arguments. One junior dev walked out in tears after being asked to rewrite comment headers to include Julian's name. Another whispered to me in the hallway, "He's trying to reconstruct history, but the code won't lie." But Julian kept going. By Friday, the Git logs had been scrubbed. Every commit message from Ray's early builds was gone, replaced with boilerplate entries like initial refactor or legacy optimization, JH. He even updated the repository metadata to list himself as primary architect. It was shameless and sloppy. Ray saw it all, never said a word. I caught him later that evening sitting in the darkened lab with a single lamp on, flipping through a hard copy of our original system blueprint. The one with coffee stains and late-night pizza smudges. His initials were in the corner of every page. Dated, signed. I stood there for a long moment before asking, "You gonna stop him?" He didn't even look up. "Let him finish the story," he said. "I'm just waiting for the footnotes." That weekend, Henrik's team sent over their initial review notes. They were polite, but pointed. "Please clarify the licensing lineage of the routing infrastructure," one line read. Another was more surgical. "We cannot locate the original assignment of IP rights from Ray Fallon to Archbyte in the materials provided. Please advise." Julian freaked. He started hunting through old file servers like a man searching for his own birth certificate. But he was looking in the wrong decade, because what he didn't know, and never would, was that the original agreement never assigned those rights away. Not formally, not legally, and the only person who could answer Henrik's question honestly was the man whose name they just erased. Henrik scheduled a follow-up. During the call, he leaned in just slightly and asked, "One more thing. Who owns the core routing layer license as of today?" Julian hesitated, a second too long. Then, "We do." Henrik smiled politely. "I see." Ray, across the office, finally closed his notebook. For the first time in days, he leaned back in his chair like a man who just watched a trap close around someone who thought they were the hunter. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But I swear, the air around him shifted, like a cold front had finally rolled in. The morning of the acquisition signing felt like a movie set, except everyone forgot they weren't the director. Wade had on his most expensive blazer, the one with lapels too wide for anyone under 50. Julian was practically vibrating, pacing in the glass conference room, rehearsing one-liners like he thought Henrik would hand him a job offer on the spot. The legal team had already chilled the champagne. A photographer hovered by the lobby mural, snapping candids of startup life while everyone tried to look casual. Ray walked in at 8:57. No badge swipe, no announcement, just materialized through the side hallway like smoke returning to a room. He wore the same gray shirt he'd worn on his first day at Archbyte. No logo, no flash, sleeves rolled. In his left hand, he carried a thin navy folder. No markings, no branding, just a clean, exact rectangle of implication. Wade saw him. Paused, blinked, then waved a distracted half-hand in acknowledgement like Ray was someone's +1 who'd wandered in by mistake. Julian didn't even glance up. Henrik arrived at 9 Hus on the dot. Danish precision in a black turtleneck, calm as a surgeon. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, nodded through the introductions. His assistant handed over the final paperwork packet with a ribbon so absurd it looked like a holiday ad. Everyone smiled. Everyone relaxed. The signing ceremony began. Henrik sat at the head of the table, flipping pages with quiet, methodical fingers. Wade poured a glass of champagne, handed it to Julian like he was passing a torch. The lawyers buzzed in the background, confirming wire instructions and escrow timing. You could practically feel the dollar signs pulsing in the walls. $270 million and climbing. And Ray? Ray took a seat against the back wall, not at the table, not in the spotlight, just watching, until page 9. That's when Henrik paused, tilted his head, looked around the room. Before we conclude, he said, voice gentle but deliberate, I'd like to clarify one final point about the architecture, specifically the ownership of the core routing system. We've flagged inconsistencies in the license trail. I'm told it was developed in-house. Can anyone confirm exclusive rights transfer? Wade opened his mouth. Julian leaned forward, but before either could speak, Ray stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just stood. He walked to the table, placed the slim folder in front of Henrik, and returned to his chair without a word. Henrik raised an eyebrow, opened it. One page, one paragraph, typed in clean serif font, notarized and signed. It stated, plain as daylight, that the proprietary routing system central to Archbyte's architecture was and always had been legally owned by the Fallon Infrastructure Holding Trust. No revocation on file, no transfer executed, fully intact, fully enforceable. Henrik didn't laugh. He exhaled slowly, then looked up. Wade's smile froze, half-formed. Julian's mouth opened just slightly, like the beginnings of a protest he didn't dare voice. Henrik tapped the paper once with his finger. And this, he said quietly, was not disclosed during diligence. Ray didn't move. Didn't need to. The storm had arrived. He just brought the wind in early. Wade was mid-sentence when the second glass of champagne hit Julian's hand. To bold vision and modern leadership, he declared, like he was auditioning for a tech awards show nobody invited him to. Henrik offered a thin smile, the kind you give to over-enthusiastic hotel clerks. Everyone clapped. Someone took a photo. One of our junior devs cried, real tears, because she thought this was the moment her equity would turn into beachfront property. I stood near the coffee cart, pretending to fix a broken stir stick, watching Ray. He hadn't moved in over 20 minutes, just waited, measured. Wade extended his hand toward Henrik with a flourish, like he was sealing a deal with a royal blessing. Henrik reached across the table, expression unreadable, fingertips brushing the champagne-glossed contract folder. And that's when Ray stood up. Again, not fast, not theatrical, just steady, intent. He walked forward, folder in hand, same navy blue, same unmarked cover. And without a word, as Wade's hand connected with Henrik's, Ray slid the folder sideways across the table. The timing was surgical. The sound of paper sliding across wood sliced through the applause like a blade. Henrik paused, looked down, lifted the cover, read, and then he chuckled. Not politely, not nervously, loudly. The kind of laugh that's part disbelief, part appreciation, part, how stupid do you think I am? Wade froze mid-shake, still gripping Henrik's hand. Julian's champagne glass tilted just slightly, and I swear I saw a droplet hit his polished shoes. Everyone else blinked like the lighting had just changed. Henrik stood slowly, still holding the folder, and looked across the room, first at Wade, then Julian, then finally Ray. According to this, he said, his voice calm but cold, you attempted to sell me a platform whose core routing system is not owned by Archbyte, but by an external trust. A trust, I might add, controlled by Mr. Fallon. He turned to Ray. Is this accurate? Ray didn't nod, didn't smile, just replied. It's publicly recorded and time-stamped. Henrik tapped the folder again. Then this deal, he said, looking directly at Wade now, is based on materially false information. Wade's jaw moved, but no sound came out. Julian actually reached for the document like he could undo it by proximity. Henrik didn't let go. He placed the folder back into his own briefcase, closed it with a crisp click, then stepped away from the table. The room shifted from champagne to static in seconds. Ray didn't gloat, didn't blink. He just walked back to the wall, picked up the chair he'd been sitting in, and rolled it slowly out of the room. That was the real moment. Not the document, not the laugh. It was that chair rolling softly over the hardwood, like the last echo of a verdict everyone heard but no one wanted to process. Ray left the room without looking back. Wade's hand was still outstretched. Henrik never shook it again. You tried to sell me a company you don't own. Henrik's voice wasn't angry. That's what made it hit so hard. It wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, just final. A sentence you couldn't argue with because the math was already done. The silence that followed cracked something in the room. You could feel it, a kind of collective unblinking. Julian's face drained to the color of uncooked fish. He opened his mouth like he had a backup excuse queued up, but no words came. Wade stammered something about miscommunication and internal IP alignment, but it was dead on arrival. Henrik didn't even look at him. He was too busy flipping through the folder again, as if rereading the paragraph might somehow undo the fact that the system they were paying $270 million for didn't legally belong to the people selling it. Then came the fallout. Due diligence failure, Henrik said, as if reciting an item off a grocery list. He handed the champagne glass to an assistant without tasting it. Signing is cancelled pending full investigation of proprietary claims. The photographer lowered his camera. Wade's lawyer leaned in, whispering in frantic, bird-like chirps. One of the board members, Gloria, I think, stood up and said, "Is this some sort of joke?" But her voice cracked halfway through the word joke, which kind of killed the delivery. The head of legal flipped open her laptop and started searching through archived PDFs like she could time travel her way out of liability. Someone else grabbed a 3-inch binder from the bookshelf, only to realize it hadn't been updated since 2020. The room turned into a paper-fueled panic spiral, every executive suddenly trying to solve a puzzle they didn't even know they were part of. Ray stood slowly, didn't say anything, didn't gloat, didn't sneer, just picked up his coat, tucked the chair under the table, and walked toward the glass door. Wade finally snapped. "Ray!" he shouted, voice cracking under the weight of a collapsing fantasy. "This is sabotage!" Ray didn't stop, didn't turn, just pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway like someone finishing a shift and heading home. And that, somehow, was the loudest part of the whole morning. Henrik waited 10 full seconds. Then, still holding the folder, he followed. Left Wade mid-stammer, Julian still pale, the board imploding in a flurry of papers and missed clauses. I followed at a distance. Couldn't help myself. Henrik caught up with Ray just before the elevator. "Mr. Fallon," he said, adjusting the strap of his bag. "I have a question." Ray turned. Henrik's tone shifted. "Would you be interested in starting something new? Something properly structured, this time?" Ray didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the floor, then back at Henrik. Then he nodded once, and the elevator opened. 2 weeks later, Archbyte posted a vague update on their blog, the kind written by PR interns trying not to say too much while saying just enough. After a thoughtful period of reflection, it began, Julian Haynes has chosen to resign from his position as CTO to pursue personal ventures. No quotes, no photos, just a disappearing act dressed in polite punctuation. The comments were disabled. By the end of that same day, news quietly broke, though only in the corners of the industry that cared to notice, that the board had suspended Wade Chalmers pending an internal review of irregularities in IP documentation and executive disclosures. Translation: the House of Cards had collapsed, and they were trying to sweep up without waking the neighbors. But the part no one really saw, no one except those of us close enough to read between the filings, was what showed up in the Delaware registry 3 days after that blog post. A new LLC, no fanfare, no launch video, no hype cycle, just a name, Folium Systems, founder and principal, Ray Fallon, registered agent, same firm Henrik used for his transatlantic ventures. The paperwork listed full legal ownership of a proprietary routing system architecture, complete with the same language Wade once tried to erase. The platform, the patents, the logic tree that made Archbyte even worth buying. All of it now flowed through Folium. And this time, it wasn't buried. It was the foundation. Ray didn't do interviews, no viral tweet threads, just pushed a quiet update to Git one morning, a new repository, clean structure, annotated code, no fluff. Engineers in the know started whispering about it within hours. One even said, "This looks like what Archbyte was supposed to be before the ego kicked in." Meanwhile, Henrik's firm invested, not with press releases or champagne, but with infrastructure, a real team, real trust, no middlemen trying to sell illusion as vision. And Ray? He came in early, left late. Same thermos, same unbranded gray shirt, but this time, when people looked up, they saw him, not because he demanded attention, because the structure they were standing on finally had his name on it. Turns out, the quiet one wasn't replaceable. He was foundational.